So the first speakers of the second session is Dan and Ryoo and Jake Schaeffer. Current students in Minerva with the title Education Reform and What It Means to Us. Once more, give them a round of applause.
Can you all hear me? Hello and good afternoon. We're glad to be here at Middle where many talented and young Korean students are trailblazing new paths and also constantly striving to achieve. We also have another student from Minerva back there, Siraj. So feel free to say hi to him after we're done.
So we're here to talk with you guys today a little bit about why we're here in Korea in the first place, and then also hopefully inspire a few of you.
This is when I was a little kid. My first memory of education was how frustrated I felt towards it. I couldn't understand how one day of testing could summarize 12 years of education. I also couldn't understand how the environment around me didn't emphasize questions and only focus on status quo without good reasoning. I often got into trouble by asking too many questions or by simply questioning authority. I knew I would find better opportunities abroad, and I did. By the time I was a senior in a US high school, I was the prefect, a highest leadership position a student could hold, and a senator for a statewide model legislature program.
And this is when I was a baby. I was born with a vision disorder, actually known as optic nerve atrophy, which basically affects the optic nerve and makes it so that my vision is pretty severely inhibited without a hope for correction. So when I was diagnosed with this, my dad was in the Air Force at the time, so I'd always kind of wanted to become a pilot. But because of my vision, I was told that not only would I not be accepted into any pilot schools, I also wouldn't be able to drive, which I think for a lot of you might not seem like a big deal, but in the States, that's basically a death sentence. So despite this, I managed my way through primary school, through middle school. By the time I reached high school, I discovered that I had a passion for music. I had begun working with a San Francisco investment firm on a project that my best friend and I had created. And then also actually did manage to learn how to drive, albeit wearing those ridiculous glasses with basically binoculars built into the tops of the frames. So making it through all of those kind of challenges, making it over those obstacles, by the time I was in my fourth year of high school, I felt very confident. But as I started my kind of college search process, I was totally lost.
As I began searching for the university, I felt the same sense of frustration that I felt as a kid. I knew what I wanted in my college experience, but most of my searches turned futile. No matter the school, I couldn't find the right one for me. To start off, international student demand at US University has skyrocketed in these past few decades. However, international student population still remains less than 4% out of the entire college student population. On top of this, while I was looking for the focus and attention liberal arts education could afford via small classroom settings and more discussion-based structure, so people around me were emphasizing larger, more research-based universities that don't even focus on undergraduates.
And as I began my college search process, I realized as I looked more and more that the system was not set up fairly. The SAT and ACT tests, the tests that are the most commonly used admissions criteria for university students, are quite rigged in that scores are a better predictor of more your family income and your parents' educational level than they are a predictor of your success. So on top of this, demand at US universities alone has absolutely skyrocketed as well. But despite this, over the course of the last about 30 years, there's been no additional space or capacity added at these universities. As a result, the admissions rate at some of the top universities ranges between 6 and 15%, but this is despite many of these schools publicly acknowledging that up to 80% of their applicant pool has the actual criteria needed to attend.
Even if I decided to go to a typical US university, I probably would not be able to afford it. In a typical US Ivy League schools, the tuition is about $40,000 to $50,000 a year. Also, and this has been growing from the past. Since 1985, the consumer price index has risen about 115%, while the college inflation rate has risen above 500%. I, like many of my peers, would have needed a scholarship.
So once I continued my college application process, I've been admitted to a few universities. I began to actually look at the curriculum offered by these universities. And what I saw was, what I should have expected was that from these UC schools and some of these baby Ivy schools, some of the best education and training possible. But the more I looked, the more I saw the curriculum was outdated and was not really preparing students to enter into a career or a workforce where you would be comfortable. So as I was going through these schools, I thought that essentially there had to be a better way to structure the university experience. So as someone who visited many of these schools, I met with deans, with professors, with students. I traveled across the country going to actual classes and sitting in lecture halls. Let me share with you a little bit about what that experience might have looked like. So if you're familiar with this document, this is actually Harvard University's founding charter. And what it did was establish the university not as an institution set up to academically educate youth, but as an institution to train priests for basically colonial America. So what I saw from that was many of the universities that we kind of aspire to and we look at are universities that have more adapted to kind of fit the educational needs of whatever is the current trend, and not necessarily built to educate from the ground up. So I started asking myself, what would an institution look like if it was built today to address the actual issues that we as students, both international and domestic, already experience? And I started asking, what if there was an institution, even a new one, that could more effectively and better teach and accept students like us?
So, what would this institution look like? What would the next frontier look like? We're going to share with you 3 key components that many of us believe are key essentials for a university should look like. Global immersion. The demand for a truly global education has existed and has only continued to grow. However, to understand the world, you need to live in it. So why not do just that? Why not spend a year or a semester in different world-class cities in a country? Not by yourself, but with your peers. What if students lived in country... Oh, yeah, there's a slide for that. What if students lived in world-class cities like San Francisco, Berlin, Buenos Aires, Seoul, Hyderabad, London, or Taipei? Whoop, go back. As soon as you travel, you open yourself up to rich, immensely beautiful life experiences. Some of these experiences are simply not available behind the campus doors. Why not do this with classmates just as global as your locations?
So as I was looking at these other universities, I began to ask myself, what would the academic curriculum at this new university look like? And one of the things that I realized was we live in a constantly evolving, very, very complex world. I believe that the majority of the jobs that we are going to work in don't exist yet. So how should the university structure their curriculum in order to account for this? Universities need to be teaching students not necessarily what to think, but how to think. And how they do that is by enforcing some of the core competencies and core skills. Things like teaching students how to think critically, how to communicate effectively, and how to think creatively. And the way that they do this also, I imagine, could be reinvigorated. Currently, most universities teach in a lecture-style format, which are a great way to teach, but a terrible way to learn. So this new academic system should incorporate technology, not necessarily just for technology's sake, not because it looks cool or it's flashy, but because by doing so, you can better tailor and better personalize a student's academic experience, so that while they're in class, you can actually get feedback, see how they respond, and shape their performance both in class and outside of the classroom.
True accessibility. As I mentioned before, accessibility is an issue. What about increasing the opportunity for students like me or Jake to receive a high-class education without the high price tag? What about an admissions process that focuses on merit? What if we do away with quotas, limits, based on your social status, country of origin, or athletic ability? What if the admission process simply focused on merit? Wouldn't it be smart to do away with the $40,000 to $50,000 a year cost? What if you're able to decrease that cost to half of that? What about a quarter of that?
So you may think a university like this is wishful thinking, it's impossible, but this is exactly the university that we attend. It's a school with a reinvigorated curriculum, a renovated classroom, 4 years of global immersion, and increased accessibility for all of the world's brightest and most motivated students. So I'm a part of the class of 2019, what I was told would be the first wave of this school. I'm a part of the first undergraduate class that will be graduating from this school, and Dana is part of the
class of 2020, and I helped to shape Minerva's student experience in Seoul. I thought going to college would be the end of my stream. However, the experiences I've been afforded and my classmates have totally shifted my perspective. Now, I'm in front of the stream yet again, but this time, I'm not flustered, I'm not lost, or I'm not annoyed, but I'm ready.
And for me, by the time I was leaving high school, I felt confident and felt that my journey up the stream was entirely over. Minerva has shown me that that's not the case. I left the US for the first time 14 months ago. My passport's really only a year old, which I was told would make it 3 in its Korean age. But I've had the opportunity to now already live in San Francisco, in Berlin, Buenos Aires, and now call Seoul my home. And I've realized that Minerva has shown me there's many, many more challenges, and with each pond you may eventually reach, there are many, many more uphill and upstream battles to still continue to fight. The only difference is now I believe I have a strong support network comprised of my classmates, like Dana and like Suraj, that are there to help me, and students that I can count on as I continue my journey through the second half of the university that I chose, and I hope long afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you.